We are live. Let me see if I can see it before we get. Can you see it already in yours?
It's loading right now. But yes, we should be up and running.
All right, brother.
All right.
Take it away.
All right, guys. Welcome to Whiskey and Wisdom. We are on episode 3. As always, we have Mike Soile with Fairway Mortgage joining us, and myself, Sean Hayes of the Hayes Hometown team at Coldwell Banker Premier. And this episode, we have our special guest, Andrew Wilson with Enterprise Bank. Andrew, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Good afternoon, Sean. Mike, good to see you guys.
Awesome. So as always, let's kind of do some quick recapping here. Mike, is there any recap on the mortgage side from you in terms of what's been occurring in the past 48 hours?
Sure. Yeah. So the big deal in mortgages right now is actually the entire industry is kind of banding together to stop an impending crisis right now. And I think I alluded to this a little bit on our last episode. I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but there's a big dispute going on right now between the head of FHFA, which is basically the head of housing from a government perspective, versus the MBA. The MBA is the Mortgage Bankers Association or Alliance, and they represent all of the non-bank mortgage originators, right? It feels like to many in the industry that the government would prefer that most mortgage originations happen through banks. And if a lot of what's going on continues, a lot of mortgage originators who are not banks are going to have to exit the industry if nothing changes. And so there's this kind of tension. There's a little bit of a fight going on. We're really lobbying hard. Most people at Fairway, I think over 70% of just all of the employees at Fairway have joined the MBA and the Mortgage Action Alliance to lobby for a liquidity facility that protects, in the interim here, banks from failing because of the government mandated forbearances that are now growing. So basically, let me walk you through that in plain English. Government says you don't have to pay your mortgage. Mortgage company doesn't get paid, has to figure out what to do. Government says, don't worry, you'll get money eventually, but I need to pay my bills right now. What do I do? And without the deposits that banks have, that puts mortgage companies in a specific disadvantage that really isn't fair. And so what could happen with that? A lot of consumer choice could be taken out of the market, and that makes things worse for consumers. It makes prices higher. It makes the availability of products like bond and jumbo and lower FICO products. It makes those harder to get if you don't have companies like ours participating in that market. So there's kind of an impending I don't want to say doom. I'm not a doomsayer, but there's some issues out there, and we're working hard to fix them. So that's taken up a lot of our time.
So, just kind of touching base on one thing right there that you talked about. We've seen some of our clients reach out about the forbearance option. If they still have income coming in, they're still in a pretty strong cash position. Is this an option they should even be considering taking, or what would be the reason why they should not take that option?
That is a great question. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what forbearance even is. I think when it came out, people assumed, hey, if I don't have to make my mortgage payment, let me go ahead and enter forbearance and not make it. There's going to be no consequences. I'm getting free money, right? Right? No. So forbearance works in a couple different ways. The primary way that it works is they allow you to skip your mortgage payment right now, and then you owe it next month. And so next month you have to make 2 payments. Well, okay, so let's say that they allow a deferment for 90 days. At the end of 90 days, you have to make 4 mortgage payments, which doesn't help anybody, right? You're just literally deferring it. And so for a small period of time. And if you can't make that 4 months worth of payments at the end of that forbearance period, then they can work out a payment plan for you. And what the government said is, hey, the forbearance cannot affect your credit. Well, that's true. The forbearance will not affect your credit. But if you have to work out a payment plan at the end of it, that can affect your credit. Or if you have to defer those payments to the end of your mortgage, then that is a mortgage modification. And each servicer is being left to kind of deal with this and make it up on the fly. So each servicer is working differently. And it's really important for people that if they are going to look at taking that option, that they look into what their servicer is offering and ask the specific questions. At what point does it hurt my credit or affect my credit or even go on my credit? And at what point is this going to be considered a modification? Because at rates where they are now, modifications could impact your ability to buy your next home. It could impact your ability to refinance. There are unintended consequences of this, and that doesn't mean do it or don't do it. I can't tell you to do it or not do it. If you're in a spot where you need to do it and you don't have another option, then you have to explore that. My message has really been understand what you're doing, ask the extra questions, bring it to people like me to go over it with you if you must. Just make sure that you really understand what could happen if you take this option. So if you are able to make your payment, I think it's pretty easy. The answer is continue making your payment because this is not free money. If you're hurting and you can't, at that point, you should really start to explore this.
Now, awesome. That's great advice, Mike. And you're moving on to something a little more fun real quick here. What are you drinking today?
Ooh, today I got some good stuff. So Rowan's Creek. You guys might remember this. This is what I bought for the what was that, clay shoot for the chamber. This stuff evaporated quickly. It's a straight Kentucky bourbon. It's one of my favorites. It's 100 proof, so smooth enough, but also strong enough, and high corn, not a lot of rye. Pretty smooth stuff. What are you drinking?
Excellent. I'm going pretty typical today. I have got the Macallan 12 triple cask. So, it has, let's see here. It is a mixture of European American sherry seasoned cask with an ex-bourbon American oak cask. So it's got a nice little flavor profile to it with a little bit of sweetness and with that sherry and bourbon and being introduced into it. So not my normal, but I like it. It.
So Columbini's calling me out for drinking a rookie bourbon, but hey, sometimes it's good to go back to basics every now and then. Thanks, Mike. Andrew, what are you drinking, buddy?
Today, I kind of like Sean, a little bit sweet. I've got a perfect Manhattan today.
Excellent.
Nice. And drinking local today. Base for my perfect Manhattan is still 360, or excuse me, still 630 Rally Point Rye.
Excellent. They're doing some really
perfect
good
Manhattan
stuff right now.
That's half sweet, half dry vermouth.
Correct. I'm not.
What kind of vermouth do you use?
I'm not big on the super sweet, so I actually diluted a little bit further toward the dry.
Nice. Interesting. What's your go-to vermouth? Sorry, Sean.
That's okay.
I typically go to my friends at Total Wine for that and change it up every once in a while. I'm not even sure what we've got in the bar downstairs right now.
Fair enough.
Exactly right. And just for a little bit of information out there, Still 630 is doing some really cool stuff right now for the local community. They are actually creating batches of hand sanitizer, just like our friends at Four Hands Brewery are doing. So they are taking online orders. They will let you know when it is ready to be picked up. So if you are in desperate need, give some business to some local people who are doing some good things.
I like it.
That's a good point, Sean.
Always down for that.
Always.
Sean,
so,
real estate market, what are you seeing?
Well, kind of status quo from where we were 48 hours ago. We're still seeing inventory hit the market, not quite at the same level we typically would in a spring market. But the inventory that's coming on the market is in a very competitive situation. Buyers who are out there looking at property are ready to put pen to paper. So looking at stats for the last 48 hours in St. Louis City and St. Louis County, we had 128 new listings hit the market, and we had an additional about 105 go under contract. So for a midweek scenario, that's pretty solid. And of course, we're seeing more activity on the weekends as is typical. So I would anticipate this weekend being the same as the last 3 or 4 have been, where we will see more go under contract for the total of the week that we even saw hit the market. So, still a very competitive scenario out there for a lot of neighborhoods and a lot of price points. Just kind of a matter of, is this the right time for somebody to be making a move for themselves or not?
Sure. some people don't have a choice, right? Some people, it's interesting because some people are questioning the decision. Why is real estate financial? I think everybody at this point knows somebody that either had to sell or had to move or was already in process. And so some people don't have a choice whether to proceed with caution. And so we're still seeing a lot of activity as well from our seat. And I got to give a quick shout out because I see one of my favorite compliance people just joined. So Megan, I promise not to quote any specific rates until after we're out of business. So, anyway,
well, it's kind of Mike, to your point there. I mean, perfect examples of that are, I've got one client that we put their listing on the market because they had a property under contract in their new location already, and they had to get their current home sold in order to make that new contract work. So they didn't have a choice. In other scenarios, I've got a couple of clients who wrote purchase contracts because their leases are coming due in the next 30 to 60 days. And again, they're not really in a position to want to go month to month and spend that extra cash. It just makes perfect sense for them to go ahead and continue on with the process that we had already started prior to the shelter in place orders coming down about 5 weeks ago now.
Sure. Let's get to Andrew here, because I know this is a lot of what is on people's mind and a lot of the reason that they're tuning in here. So we already have a couple questions relating to this. I actually think, Andrew, we should maybe shift gears a little bit here. We got some news today about all this. So I'm going to share my screen here just for a second. Let's address the elephant in the room, and then let's talk about how things were working and what the possibilities are for the future. Fair enough? Or do you have something you want to say before we get to that? All right. Actually, before I do that real quick, why don't you give us a little bit of your background, just so people know who you are.
All right. So my name is Andrew Wilson. Thanks for having me, guys. I've been working with Enterprise Bank, working specifically with small and mid-sized businesses, coaching, advising in this, particularly in the past couple of weeks, working on getting a lot of information to people about what's really going on with the different government relief programs and how they're working. Mike, like you were mentioning on the mortgage side, different institutions are handling it differently. The government has set guidelines, and then anything above and beyond, banks can elect to have different procedures or have different qualifications for people to apply for the payroll protection program. And so getting information about the basics out there, and then encouraging people to get to talk to their financial partners has been a big push for me over the past couple of weeks.
I bet that's taken most, if not all, of your time. Actually, I'm sure you probably switched gears pretty heavily towards that. So let's go directly to the elephant in the room. This is from the St. Louis Business Journal today. Everybody's kind of covering this. The Paycheck Protection Program officially runs out of money. That headline and others like it kind of took the news media and social media by storm today. So I feel like we should start there.
Yeah. So just a quick highlight of what the Paycheck Protection Program is. It was rolled out under the CARES Act, particularly designed for businesses that have at least one employee, of course, but below 500 employees, with the goal of the program being getting money back into employers' pockets so that they can distribute that in the form of payroll to their employees, keeping people working, keeping people on their payroll so they can continue to make those mortgage payments, for example, and not taking deferrals on their mortgage. So it was a program that the government and the SBA had banks administering. So like I mentioned a little bit ago, an individual, sole proprietor, all the way up to a business of 500 employees would apply through their bank. The bank would then process the application, confirming that the loan request size is analogous to an average month's payroll costs from the trailing year, and then the multiplier that you could apply for is 2.5 times an average monthly payroll cycle payroll expense, and that includes stuff like retirement bonus or retirement and other payroll related costs can be included in that in that figure.
Was there a cap for who could apply? If you're Walmart, did Walmart qualify for this?
Had to have less than 500 employees.
For the PPP?
The PPP program, correct.
Okay.
So the government originally outlined $349 billion for the program. There was, leading up to it, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, Mike, as well, with a lot of different information, people seeing and hearing a lot of mistruths or partial truths about what was going on and how to apply and whether or not they could apply. So it ended up going live for applicants to begin applying 2 Fridays ago, April the 3rd, and then last Friday, April the 10th, sole proprietors and 1099 contractors could submit applications through their banks as well. So I unfortunately can't really speak to every organization and how they did it. I can say for ours, Enterprise did process the applications on a first come first served basis.
Okay.
And
how long did it take from application to SBA approval to funding on average for you guys? That's a question that we have from the audience. Good question.
Yeah, that's a pretty tough question to answer.
Okay.
Similar to just about any loan situation, the more detailed and more accurate the application was, the easier it would be. So the bank dedicated a task force strictly to working through the applications. And we noticed a number of different themes of things that were left out, signatures or initial lines that were missed, and that type of stuff. And unfortunately, with lending products, as you guys well know, you can't just miss a signature.
Mm-hmm.
So then any back and forth time with that just goes to extend that process even further. Once worked through the process and the loan has been approved by the bank has 10 days to fund the loan. So any individual or business that had received an approval number from the SBA before they ran out will be getting their funding.
That's
okay.
a really
so
good
if you don't have money today, yeah, okay.
So what it means is that they ran out of money, is that they ran out of allocated money. So anyone who had a loan approved with the SBA account number, those funds were deducted from the usable allocation.
So for the next 10 days, people who are already approved are still going to be getting their money.
Correct. They're still going to be getting those disbursements.
And Mike, to answer your question, so if you were approved on Tuesday, then they only have 10 days from Tuesday to get you your money in that case, and you've already claimed it. So that's good. Sean, what do you think? You want to go to, we're getting some more questions here. Do you want to keep going
absolutely.
with questions, or do you want to keep rolling?
Let's keep going some more questions here, because we're looking at another question from Melissa here about what was involved in being approved for the program to be able to qualify for it.
So there are kind of 2 different answers to that. The first one is any banking institution that was not formally SBA approved, they could apply to be able to process these applications for their clients. So that's answer number 1 on the bank side. On the client side, really the 2 biggest factors were being in business as of February of this year and having payroll were the 2 biggest factors. There were a number of other details and criteria that you had to submit with the application, different documentations, but those were pretty much the main criteria, is having payroll and having been in business.
Got it. I actually don't want to belabor this topic too much, considering that funds are now gone. But was there a certain, correct for now, was there a certain criteria on the amount of the loan that you had to apply towards payroll? Did it have to be 100%, or were there options where you could use it for maybe some additional costs that you were incurring during this time?
Good question. The answer is yes. You can use it it is directed to payroll, but there are other costs that you can apply the funds toward. Before diving into any of the uses, I would encourage anyone who has received payroll protection program funding to be as detailed and as thorough as they can in their documentation of how they do use the funds.
That's really good point.
The SBA guideline is that at least 75% of the funds must be used for payroll purposes. And then the additional 25% could be used for commercial mortgage interest, could be used for rents, could be used for utilities, and some other operating costs along those lines. But in order so the big draw for the program is that in an 8-week period trailing the loan funding, if 75% of the funds were used for payroll, a business could apply to have the entire loan forgiven instead of it converting into a loan that they would have to pay off over the next 2 years.
So my question was going to be, okay, you have to use 75% or else what? And the answer to the or else what is you may lose the forgiveness portion. That's the or else what, right?
Correct. The loan will be.
Sorry, Sean, I cut you off there.
Be a two-year term loan at 1% interest.
Okay. And just so for anybody who has been lucky enough to receive these funds, they cannot apply that extra 25% over the 75% threshold towards capital improvements or things of that nature. They need to make sure it's basically keeping the business afloat at this point. Is that correct?
Correct. That's what the program is designed to do. That's what those funds were intended to be used for.
I'm not going to lie though, we did not apply nor receive this, so I can speak freely, right? The worst case terms, even if I didn't need payroll, if we took those funds and did use it for capital improvements or did use it for whatever the heck we wanted, the fallback terms are still better than any other loan you could have got, right? I mean, if we're talking a sub 5% interest rate, that's still, I wasn't going to find a business loan for less than that anyway. Am I missing something there?
As far as I understand, so all of my answers here today with this regard are my understanding, by the way. That's a little asterisk that I want to be sure that we have out there.
Fair enough.
That I am not an extension of the SBA, and nor am I able to speak for my entire organization. This is how I am interpreting the rules and regulations and ramifications.
Sure, understood.
So one of my biggest pieces of advice to people in this whole time is really to be in closer concert with some of their financial partners. This was a program designed to help keep the American workforce strong and to kind of continue to help the economy along. So could a business use these funds for purposes that they weren't intended? I suppose the answer to that is yes. As part of the commitment, the attestations that the business has to make in applying for the funds was that these funds will be used for business purposes to keep the business functioning, as it has had a negative impact due to the economy as a result of the current situation resulting from the coronavirus.
All right, absolutely. That sounds great. So kind of transitioning here, Andrew, let's talk about a couple of things. One being what options are now available for people who do need payroll help. And secondly, what are we looking at in terms of 1099 independent contractors, people who are vendors for a lot of companies? They have relationships, realtors come to mind. Obviously, there are a lot of other institutions that would apply to. So in any order you want to take that, what's kind of some additional, pathways at this point in time for those people to explore?
Yeah. So there are two fantastic resources here in the St. Louis area are the Economic Partnership, the St. Louis Economic Partnership, and the St. Louis Regional Chamber, both of which have some fantastic resources on their website with regard to some different grant programs that are in existence, as well as a bunch of other wisdom that they can help provide businesses as far as different strategies or different opportunities that they could take advantage of at this point. As far as the payroll protection program goes, as Mike shared with everybody, that kind of nasty headline, I think a lot of people are expecting another allocation of funds from the government. I know there's been some discussion of about another $250 billion or so. I certainly couldn't say whether or not that's coming, but I would encourage businesses, independent contractors, sole proprietors, etc., if they had any interest before, to continue gathering documentation and getting ready for those next funds. I know that there are different organizations that are continuing to accept applications. Enterprise is one of those that is continuing to take applications, and we're continuing to process those applications that are in the pipeline that we're not able to get processed through to funding. With the goal,
you're just kind of getting them ready for if in case,
instead of having to restart the machine if and when the government decides to release funds. It has been our choice to continue to work on those to have our clients as ready as possible.
So your advice then, Andrew, would be to go ahead, if you need these funds, even though we've run out of money for the current allocation, to get your queue in the line and be ready to roll if a second disbursement does come through.
Yep. Have conversations with your financial partners, your attorney, your accountant, your banker, so that you can have your documentation ready to go, and or submit it if your organization will take it, so that if and when those funds are available, you're ready to go.
And I dig in on that independent contractor piece because, Andrew, who was it that it's still in my mind, but at the chamber luncheon on Tuesday, the speaker, was that one of the economic development guy? Who was that spoke at the lunch?
I believe Tom was is an employee of the SBA. I believe he works in the regional.
He's an employee of the actual SBA. Okay. So one of the things that he said that kind of trailed off, and I think this is of interest to a lot of people and a point that a lot of people need to get clarified, is when we were asking, okay, well, what if you don't have employees? What if you have 1099 contractors and those are your employees? What do you do then? Well, you don't qualify for the Paycheck Protection Program for them. They need to apply for it on their own. So that's been, I think, a point of confusion for a lot of people. If you are an independent contractor, 1099, you don't necessarily have a payroll other than yourself. Were you applying, or should you have applied for the PPP or the other one, the EIDL, or do you just not qualify for either?
Good question. So the EIDL was the program that was directed straight to the SBA. You would apply to their website. There was a grant feature to that. Apparently, the guidance that I have learned about that was that the grant feature for that was about $1,000 per employee up to 10. Unfortunately, today that program reached its maximum allocations as well. So the government is not taking economic injury relief or disaster loan applications at this point. Even less sure whether or not they will open that platform back up again for individuals, 1099 contractors, sole proprietors, or businesses to apply for. On the payroll protection program side, 1099 contractors, sole proprietors were able to apply, and their documentation is going to look a little bit different. Perhaps a bit of a silver lining in this is we are in the tax season has been delayed a little bit, but we are in yesterday would have been the tax application deadline, so a lot of people have their 2019 taxes prepared. Those individuals could use their 1099 miscellaneous form or their Schedule C to help verify income purposes. So as an independent contractor, or as a sole proprietor, you own all the assets and liabilities of of your company. So the money that you brought in as income is considered your wages and can be supported by the 1099 miscellaneous or Schedule C forms from your taxes.
So those 1099 employees should also go ahead and work with somebody such as yourself and get their application in place, so in case funds are reallocated, they're also queued up and ready to roll.
Correct. They are as able to apply as any other business, and the amount of money that they would be able to apply for is 2.5 times their monthly average income. So if you had a slow first quarter of 2019 and really hit it out of the park in the third quarter, say, the number that you would come to is an average over those 12 months, and then 2.5 times the monthly average is what you can apply for.
That's a huge point of clarification. So thanks for mentioning that. So just to repeat, again, if more funds are made available, or if you had already applied and are waiting on a decision, or you've got your decision and you're waiting on disbursement, if you were a 1099 contractor, you were able to apply for the PPP, and your 2.5 times payroll would have been 2.5 times your average commissions over the last 12-month period, you said?
Correct.
Okay. Sean, not to get too personal here, but do you know of any agents, real estate agents specifically, yourself or others, that did apply, and what experience they had with this? Or Andrew, if the answer is no for you, Sean, Andrew, did you specifically work with any?
Unfortunately, I did not have to apply for one of these products. We're in a pretty strong position here ourselves, so we're grateful for that. I have not heard from any agents who have actually applied for it, but I have heard from agents who definitely have questions about it because they are concerned about where they're at personally in the marketplace compared to where they might have been if we were not in this environment.
Thank you for that. Andrew, any specific clients come to mind in the real estate world?
Not particularly in the real estate world. I am aware of a number of different businesses that really function with independent contractors as effectively as staff. That's just kind of way their industries operate. I'm aware of a number of different businesses and individuals that have voiced quite a bit of interest, and several that have applied through a number of different organizations, and similar to a W-2 employer, have had different experiences. Some based on their timing and their application package have been very smooth. Others, perhaps they're frustrated that they weren't able to get it through the queue before the government ran out of funding. My condolences to those people is that I can assuredly tell you that every institution is working as hard as they possibly can.
I've seen that. Absolutely. I've definitely seen that.
So it is, from a bank's perspective, it is our duty and our privilege to do as much as we possibly can for our clients and for our community. So, rest assured that there was no malice or anything of the like. It's, working as diligently as possible as they can.
Well, I mean, take a step back and think about it. $350 billion all got grabbed in the matter of 3 weeks. Can you can sit there and imagine the amount of nationwide activity that had to occur for that to happen? And that hopefully gives people a little bit of pause and maybe a little bit of understanding there. I don't know exactly how much the entire mortgage industry turns over year. I know it's an $11 trillion industry, but that's probably, a third of all of the mortgages that are originated in the country in less than a month. So that's nuts. In closing here, I don't want to let the ticker drag too long. Anything else you really want to get across to folks?
Yeah, I've got a few more thoughts, particularly just in this time of insecurity, whether or not the government is going to allocate more funds for the payroll protection program or not. Have some action items, for lack of a better word, some charges for businesses and so sole proprietors, 1099 contractors out there. Now is really a great time to focus on, on making sure that businesses' goals are at the center of their cash and capital decisions, both in the short term and the long term. Does what you're doing with your money match the strategy to get you to the goal of where the business wants to be? Do you review your partnerships? Are you getting the right wisdom from the right people? Are you in touch with? Are you in sync with your with your financial partners, with your vending partners, with your clients? Making sure that those relationships are strong. It's a time to get creative, potentially looking for partnerships, and even with what was a few weeks ago a competitor.
It's better than any business advice I would have. My business advice is usually, hey, watch season 3 of Narcos, and it'll teach you anything about business you need to know. So better advice, Andrew. Better advice.
I think really, even though nobody knows what the time, the date that it'll be, is really looking at the business in the mirror as far as how, who do we want to be? What do we want to look like when we reach the end of this tunnel? How are we going to re-release ourselves to the world? Is it going to be a big grand opening? Or how are we going to prove to our staff, to our clients, to our partners that we have a clean and safe environment? Are we working with our internal and external communication partners, whomever that may be, to make sure that those messages are clean and consistent? Are we ready for what we see coming? Do we have the supply line still in place? Do we, can we deal with spikes in demand? And so I've been with all of that in mind, would really encourage people to have a conversation with their banks and with their accountants and attorneys, and really work on making sure their business plan and the tools that they have in place are in line to their goals, both short term and long term.
What you're saying is, don't just sit here and hope this thing ends soon. Actually prepare for it to end, and that way, when it does end, you hit the ground running.
Oh, you couldn't have said it better. I think there is not a person out there that wants this thing to continue. But what are we doing now? Is there more that we could be doing now to help ourselves when we do come out of it?
That's great advice, Andrew.
One of the best pieces of advice that I have heard from clients and just kind of out there in the market is really using your people to help to come up with ideas. If you're starting to scratch your head about coming up with ideas, or write the right business plan, source your employees, use your team. These are the people that are the heartbeat of your organization, large or small, and they can have quite a lot of knowledge and kind of a different viewpoint than a lot of people at the top who've really been dealing with the problem in a different perspective.
That's awesome advice. Sean, any closing thoughts from you, sir?
No, I think this has been phenomenal, Andrew. We're getting some great comments on Facebook Live about how helpful your advice has been to people, and we know in these trying times that any life raft we can do to help folks out is going to be highly beneficial to them, and we really appreciate you taking the time and providing this really tremendous information that could be of great benefit to some of the people who have joined us today.
Let me kind of recap here for those who have joined late and maybe missed some of the meat and potatoes of this. And please, gentlemen, I'm going to forget something here, so insert anything I may have forgot as a key takeaway here. Key takeaways, the PPP has run out of money today. There are rumors of another $250 billion allocation, which is roughly, I guess, about 2/3 of the original allocation again. So the advice is to continue engaging with your local bank. And don't take the foot off the gas there. If you were already approved, you're still going to get your disbursement. If you have not yet been approved, don't give up. Be prepared in case there's a second allocation. In fact, the be prepared is kind of a theme here. And again, we said, don't just wait and hope that this ends, be prepared for it to end. And what are you going to do next? If you're a real estate agent or any other type of 1099 independent contractor, you are eligible for the PPP in theory. Your payroll would be your own average of your earnings over the last 12-month period. What else am I forgetting, guys? Key takeaways.
No, I think that's really it. Prepare, and partnerships are kind of the thing.
Partnerships.
Is, make sure that every industry has been impacted somehow, period. So making sure that those relationships, maybe they've changed for the better, for the worse, perhaps. Touching base with vendors and clients, making sure that you guys that everyone's on the same page. And then your finance team, and particularly with you guys in the mortgage world, in the business banking world, those partners can add a lot of value when you're talking about business planning and/or home financial planning. Bring those people in early and often.
I like it. You know what? In closing here, let's close this way. Andrew gave a really good tip. Let's, Sean, you and I give one tip here for those watching that we think is important for getting through the next few weeks, and then we can close on that. So out of a conversation I had earlier today, somebody asked me how I was keeping up my motivation, and I said inertia. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. And so for me, I haven't stopped, and so it's been easy not to stop. And if you are finding yourself stopping or slowing down, waiting for somebody else, start moving. Keep that energy level, keep that momentum going, and it will be easier for you every day to keep going. So that's my little piece of advice. Sean, what about you?
No, I couldn't agree more with that, Mike. And, kind of piggyback off that and build upon it is, I know somebody like myself and I know somebody like Mike, we are here as resources, not even just in the business world. If you're having a struggle right now and you just want to talk to somebody that's not the same 2, 3, 4 voices that are inside your walls you've been hearing for the last 3, 4, 5 weeks, call us. We're happy to talk right now. I mean, it's all about making sure that we're taking care of each other. And, we're here to be a voice, and we're here to talk to you. It doesn't have to be about anything in particular. If you just want to shoot the stuff, so to speak, let's talk. Let's talk, because, you never know what's going to come up. You never know what's going to come out of it. Perfect example is this right here. Mike and I were talking, a few weeks ago, and this is now a thing. So here we are.
It's a thing now, yeah. That's a best way I could have thought of to end Whiskey and Wisdom episode 3. Cheers, guys.
Perfect. Mike, Sean, thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks for joining us, buddy.
See you guys.
See ya.